I'm headed to the gym this morning and I'm checking the news and I see that UFC and Sage Northcutt have parted ways, that Dana White did not choose to continue his contract. Sage Northcutt, his contract expired. He was on a 3-fight win streak, and you would think this is kind of when negotiations are in his favor, when the contract renegotiating, a new contract comes up. And the UFC decided not to sign him. I was really surprised by this. Sage is a guy that the UFC has really pushed since day one. He made his debut in the UFC at a 50-50 pay scale, meaning $50,000 purse to show, $50,000 win bonus, which is a lot more than the normal fighter. Most UFC fighters come into the pay scale starting around 8,000, 10,000, 10 and 10, 8 and 8, and you work your way up. Sage came in very much with a great opportunity, great way of making money, and he had the UFC machine pushing him, backing him the entire time. Going on a 3-fight win streak, changing weight divisions. In his last fight, he finished by knockout. And the UFC didn't resign him. When I hear this, it kind of tells me that there was problems in the negotiation. He's a good ambassador for the sport. He really is. I mean, you know, he's a nice kid. He's you know, he's got a clean record. He's super in shape, and he's a good fighter. He still needs some work, but you can see he's got a 6-2 record in the UFC, I believe, which is a great record. 6-2 in the UFC. Granted, I do believe some of his competition was picked for him. I think we've seen that some of the competition was a favorable matchup for Sage, but a 6-2 record in the UFC is not easy to achieve, especially coming off of a 3-fight win streak. But it tells me that when the contract came up for negotiations, his manager or possibly his father, someone was pushing too hard. Someone was valuing their client a little bit more than maybe they were worth to the organization. And the only reason I say his father, I've just heard that his father is somebody that plays a great deal in his negotiations. Sage is only 22 years old. He was signed in the UFC at like 19. So his father has been a great part of all of this, all of these negotiations, and a big part of his life. He's in his corner and everything. Or the UFC is playing hardball with that and choosing not to resign him. He has a 90-day waiting period before he can negotiate with any other organizations. Maybe they're making Sage and his team rethink that number that they might have given him, come back with something a little more on the terms of what the UFC was thinking, and then they will proceed, because I don't see why you wouldn't. You know, he's a good guy, good kid, and people tune in to fight him. You know, he's got a massive following. He's got 750,000 followers on Instagram, and the UFC enjoys promoting him, and people like to hear from him. At first, it was kind of people give him a hard time because he's so clean cut. I get it. Some of the stuff he says is a little funny, but we still watch him fight. I hope the best for him. If he decides to choose to fight outside of the UFC, I hope he can continue improving, and then maybe we'll see him again one day, but we'll wait and see. I think we have about a 90-day waiting period where these negotiations could change, and maybe we will or will not see Sage inside of the octagon again.